stanza 43 of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khaayam. Omar continues to encourage us to live more by intuition, to live more by the soul's joy. So I'll read it first, and then Swami Kriyananda will sing it for us. The grape that can with logic absolute the 22 jarring sects confute, the subtle alchemist that in a trice life's leaden metal into gold transmute.
Stanza 43. The grape that can with logic absolute the 72 jarring sects confute, the subtle alchemist that in a trice life's leaden metal into gold transmute.
There are several interesting points made here by Yogananda in his, not just in his paraphrase, but in his expanded meaning. And it includes the question or the topic of doubt. Now, the reason I seem doubtful in my demeanor is that doubt is something that Swami Kriyananda himself often spoke of as having been one of his challenges in past lifetimes, for which his dharma and role of a teacher, spiritual teacher, was a compelling part of working out, not just the doubt, because he didn't really have doubts in this lifetime after meeting Yogananda, but in balancing the scales of karma for having doubted in past lives. So I find it interesting that the expanded meaning speaks of doubt. So I don't know how much of this comes from Yogananda's original commentary that Kriyananda has edited, and how much reflects his own thoughts on this one. But in any case, there's a number of interesting points here. He starts off in the expanded meaning, for those of you who have copies of the book, saying spiritual doubts can never be resolved by thought or argument. This is very interesting or readily apparent. You know, whether you're talking politics in today's polarized environment or talking with somebody of another religion who are convinced of their way, you find that with people, it's just impossible to come to any real agreement except on stuff that is so basic that there's no point in hardly even affirming it, except for the point of perhaps being friendly. And so what you find, and in human arguments too, when two people aren't getting along or have different views, it's like a ping pong game. It's just, back and forth and back and forth, and what about this and what about that? It's an endless argument. And that's what Omar means by the 72, meaning 72, jarring sects, that's sects, as in religious sects, not sex, confute. And the grape that with logic absolute, that's a tongue-in-cheek logic absolute, the grape represents intuition. And when we have true intuition, we simply know. And this idea of the value, importance of intuition in life is woven throughout these quatrains. But the question comes up, how do you know what is intuition? Well, intuition, though it has its source in a higher realm of gnosis or knowing, it has to be tested. As Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them. And he also said, test the spirits to see if they are of God. And what that means is when we have what we think is intuition, whether within the context of our daily meditation or a meditation, or in the context of everyday life, ideas come to us. It's good to test them to a certain point to see if they are still valid. You just have to experiment because it's so easy to be fooled by our own desires or subconscious imaginings or the excitement we might feel rather than the calm, still knowing of the heart that when something is true, it is simply true. Yes, it's more difficult that way, but this is really an aspect of living by faith. And faith has to be tested. In fact, if it's belief if it hasn't been tested. Belief that is tested becomes faith, which is knowing. You see, although that's not a distinction most people make in their language. And so, but interesting, he goes on here after making the additional point, which I think is very useful, is that the chronic doubter is never happy, is never satisfied. And that sort of unsatisfaction, that doubt, that questioning, not constructive questioning, but a kind of skepticism. Well, it is skepticism, but not so blatant, okay? So this continued doubt means that the doubter never really has peace of mind. And I remember Swami Kriyananda saying that, although I don't see it in this text, saying that for him and in his relationship with Paramahansa Yogananda, it was love that solved whatever tendency towards doubt. Like I say, he insisted he never doubted his relationship with the Guru, but he said he went through a period of testing where if Yogananda said something mundane, like it's sunny in Los Angeles, and Kriyananda was elsewhere down the coastline, he would had this instinct or this habit of doubting such things. Anyway, his love for his Guru eventually dissolved that inclination to doubt. In any case, he says that few people still living in their senses, the best responses to spiritual doubt is to live in joy, not in heaviness or pessimism. Doubts feed on one another. It's an interesting way of putting it. It's essentially habits feed on one another, of course. The doubter grieves because he doubts, but in his grief, doubts even more. Now, you may not be afflicted by doubt, probably, but you can translate this into other tendencies that give rise to pessimism, skepticism, that give rise to despondency, and so forth. Positive constructive doubt falls into a different category, he writes. It reveals an honest search for deeper understanding. Negative doubt, therefore, is destructive, he writes. The way to bring air into a closed room is to open the windows. The way to bring freshness and understanding to the mind is to open it to life by maintaining a wholesome, positive attitude toward all of life's experiences. You know, holding a positive attitude to life's experiences is another way of saying live by faith. The faith that no matter what happens, how terrible or painful or disappointing it might be, that there must be a higher purpose with it. So do you see how that affirmation of goodness, that affirmation of a higher purpose, is itself an affirmation that dissolves doubt? And so this is what he's talking about. Interesting, Yogananda wrote that in this stanza, Omar forsakes his usual symbolic style and shows clearly the meaning of grape and wine in his philosophy. I'm not totally sure what he means by that. I think because he contrasts religious speculation and argument against, quote, the grape and the subtle alchemist that in a trice life's leaden metal into gold transmute. So he comes out a little more clearly away from his using the metaphor of wine and human love to disguise a deeper metaphysical meaning. Well, okay, folks, I think that don't doubt we will be there tomorrow and the day after. We're past our halfway mark on the 75 quatrains, so we have to start thinking about